The old neighborhood of Hollow Street has always had its share of ghost stories, whispered from one generation to the next. Tales of strange lights in abandoned houses, of figures seen in windows when no one was home. But these were just stories, the kind of local folklore that adds a bit of flavor to a quiet town. Nobody took them seriously. Not until the day the construction crew started digging up the foundations of the old Miller place at number 42. It was a hot, dusty Tuesday. The sun beat down on the backs of the workers as they tore into the earth, their machines growling and chewing through dirt and rock. They were clearing the ground for a new community garden, a project meant to bring life and color to a forgotten corner of the street. But instead of fertile soil, they found a small, rusted metal box buried deep beneath the old concrete slab of the basement. Inside, cushioned by yellowed, disintegrating foam, was a single VHS tape. The label, handwritten in faded black ink, was simple and unsettling. Before they moved in, it was a strange find, but in a place as old as Hollow Street, people unearth relics from time to time. The crew foreman, a practical man named Dave, pocketed the tape, figuring it was just some old home movie. He planned to watch it that evening out of sheer curiosity. He had no idea he was about to unleash a mystery that would unravel the very fabric of their reality. Dave lived just a few doors down, at number 56. After dinner, he dusted off the old VCR he kept in his garage and slid the tape in. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy, low-quality footage. The date stamp in the bottom corner read October 31st, 1988. The camera seemed to be positioned across the street, filming the houses of Hollow Street as they looked decades ago. The cars were different, the trees were smaller, but the homes were unmistakable. The first part of the tape was mundane. It showed kids in Halloween costumes trick-or-treating, leaves swirling across the pavement. It was a nostalgic slice of life from a bygone era. Dave smiled, remembering his own childhood. But then, the camera's focus shifted. It zoomed in on the front door of number 48, the house directly next to his. The front door opened, and a young couple walked out. They looked happy, chatting and laughing as they got into a parked car. Dave squinted at the screen. There was something familiar about the man's face. He paused the tape. Leaning closer to the television, his heart began to pound in his chest. The man on the screen, the one walking out of that house in 1988, was him. A younger version of him, maybe in his early 20s, but unmistakably Dave. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. This was impossible. He wasn't born until 1991. He didn't move to Hollow Street until 2015. He rewound the tape, watched it again. It was him, the way he walked, the gesture he made with his hand as he talked. It was undeniably him, existing 3 years before he was even born. Shaken, he fast-forwarded through the tape. The camera panned down the street, lingering on each house. It focused on number 34, the Henderson's place. The front door opened, and out walked a young woman with bright red hair, bouncing a baby on her hip. Dave recognized her immediately. It was Mrs. Henderson, his neighbor from across the street. But just like him, she looked exactly as she did today, not a day older, despite the 1988 date stamp. And the baby she was holding, it was her son, Liam, who was currently a teenager in high school. Dave felt a wave of nausea. He kept watching, his dread growing with each passing second. The tape showed house after house, and from each one emerged a current residence of Hollow Street. The elderly Mr. Gable from number 60, looking not a day over 70, just as he did now. The young couple, the Patels, who had just moved into number 45 last year, were shown carrying moving boxes into their new home, their clothes and hairstyles perfectly in sync with the late 80s. Every single person on his block appeared on that tape, living their lives in 1988, completely unaged, decades before many of them were even alive. The tape ended abruptly with a shot of his own house, number 56. The camera zoomed in on the front window. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a figure appeared in the darkness behind the glass. It was just a silhouette, impossible to make out any features, but it stood there, perfectly still, as if watching the person filming. The screen went to static, and the tape clicked off. Dave sat in stunned silence. The hum of the old VCR filling the garage. His mind reeled. What did this mean? Was it a prank? A ridiculously elaborate, impossible prank? How could someone have footage of all of them from over 30 years ago, when they looked exactly as they did today? And who was the person filming? Who was the figure in the window of his own home? The next morning, Dave couldn't shake the images from the tape. He decided he had to show the others. He called an emergency neighborhood meeting, gathering everyone in his backyard. People were confused, a little annoyed at the impromptu gathering. He set up the TV and VCR, his hands trembling slightly as he inserted the tape. "You all need to see this," he said, his voice strained. "I don't know what it is, but ... we're all in it." He pressed play. A skeptical silence fell over the small crowd as the date stamp appeared. Then, as the footage began to roll, the silence was replaced by gasps of disbelief and frightened whispers. One by one, they saw themselves. Mrs. Henderson saw herself with her infant son. The Patels saw themselves moving into a house they wouldn't buy for another 30 years. Each person watched a ghost of their present self living in the past. Panic began to set in. Accusations flew. Some thought it was a deepfake, a high-tech hoax. Others, like old Mr. Gable, who had lived on Hollow Street his entire life, just stared at the screen, his face pale. "I remember that Halloween," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I remember the film crew. They said it was for a local history project. Just a couple of young folks with a big camera. They were here for a week, filming everything." His words sent a chill through the group. This wasn't a digital trick. This was real footage. It meant that over 30 years ago, someone had filmed people who looked exactly like them, living in their houses, decades before they were supposed to be there. The question was no longer how. The question was why. Why were they here? Were they replacements? Copies? Had their lives been pre-written? Their arrival on Hollow Street a destiny they couldn't escape? The name of the tape echoed in their minds. Before they moved in, it was a chronicle of their arrival, recorded before it ever happened. The residents of Hollow Street began to look at each other differently. They weren't just neighbors anymore. They were pieces of a puzzle they didn't understand, linked by a shared, impossible past. The friendly waves and casual chats were replaced by looks of suspicion and fear. Who were the people on that tape? And more importantly, if those people were them ... then who were they? Really? They started digging into the town archives, searching for any mention of a film project in 1988, any record of the people who lived in their homes back then. They found nothing. The records for their block from that entire year were mysteriously blank. It was as if that period of Hollow Street's history had been deliberately erased, leaving only one piece of evidence: the basement tape. The days that followed were filled with a quiet terror. Every creak of a floorboard, every shadow in a window, felt like a clue. They felt like actors in a play where they didn't know their lines, their homes no longer feeling like their own, but like sets on a stage. The figure in the window from the end of the tape haunted their thoughts. Was it the director of this strange show, a gatekeeper? Or was it a recording of something else, a warning of a presence that had been waiting in their homes all along? The community garden project was abandoned. The hole in the foundation of number 42 was left open, a gaping wound in the earth that had offered up their terrifying secret. Hollow Street was no longer a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. It was a place outside of time, a loop of history with an unknown beginning and a terrifying, unseen audience. The residents were trapped, not by walls or fences, but by the knowledge that their lives might not be their own. They were the replacements, the second cast, living in homes that had been waiting for them, just as the tape had shown. And they knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that the show was far from over. Someone, somewhere, was still watching. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Hollow Street. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more mysteries. We love hearing your theories, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think is really going on. Until next time, stay curious, and maybe don't look too closely at your old home movies.